The idea of Jesus being married might astonish many, but have we truly understood his life? We are taught that Jesus was celibate, entirely dedicated to his mission of spreading the gospel. But what if that's not the case? There have been suggestions that he may have indeed had a wife, and even children. Could this revelation change everything we have known about Christianity? Welcome to our YouTube channel. We will delve into a question that has caused scholars and historians to debate for millennia. Did Jesus truly marry? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss these intriguing discoveries. Whether Jesus was married has been a contentious issue in Christian history, especially when considering its connection to traditional teachings. According to traditional teachings, Jesus is viewed as celibate, unaffected by earthly emotions or desires. This notion not only shapes his image as a perfect role model, but also reinforces faith in his divinity and unparalleled perfection in the task of redeeming mankind. However, the question arises, if this is not true, could his marriage change our understanding of him and Christianity? In reality, the idea of Jesus being celibate was officially affirmed in the 4th century, when the Church confronted pagan religions that encouraged sexual rituals as part of worship. At that time, in order to protect doctrine and emphasize the differences between Christianity and these beliefs, the Church portrayed Jesus as fully celibate. However, in the early Christian communities, this idea was not emphasized in such a manner, and it may have been added to Jesus' narrative to elevate him to a higher, more spiritual level. This is something that numerous scholars and modern archaeological research have highlighted. In 2012, a groundbreaking discovery was made public. A Coptic papyrus fragment, no bigger than a credit card, containing a phrase that caused the world to reflect. Jesus said to them, "My wife." This papyrus fragment, dating back to the 4th century, is believed to be part of an ancient Coptic text. Its significance lies in the fact that this phrase directly contradicts the portrayal of Jesus as celibate. This papyrus was first introduced by Karen L. King, a theology professor at Harvard Divinity School, who led the research into its authenticity. Since then, it has ignited a fierce debate over the potential truth of Jesus having been married. The authenticity of the papyrus has been confirmed through several rounds of independent evaluations, including assessments by top experts in the field. According to King and other experts, the writing style and materials used in this papyrus match those of ancient Coptic texts, indicating it could be an authentic work from that period. However, the question of whether this is a forgery remains. Nevertheless, one undeniable fact is that this discovery has reignited debates on one of Christianity's greatest mysteries. Did Jesus truly marry? Another factor supporting this hypothesis is other documents, such as the Gospel of Mary, an ancient text uncovered at the end of the 19th century. This Gospel, written in Coptic and dating from the 2nd century, depicts a conversation between Mary Magdalene and the disciples, where Mary claims that Jesus married her and affirms that she shared a spiritual equality with him. Some scholars argue that this text may be powerful evidence of a close relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, though many still question its authenticity. Another potential piece of evidence comes from the Gospel of Philip, discovered in the Nag Hammadi Library in Egypt in 1945. This text is not a gospel in the traditional sense, but rather a collection of teachings and sayings from Jesus and his disciples. In this text, Mary Magdalene is referred to as Jesus' companion, the one he loved more than all the others. Although it doesn't explicitly mention marriage, the special bond between Jesus and Mary leads some to believe they may have been married. It is crucial to note that in the cultural and religious context of that time, it was not unusual for religious leaders to marry. In fact, in Judaism, it was a religious requirement for a rabbi to be married, and most men of Jesus' age were already married. Thus, it wouldn't be surprising if Jesus adhered to this custom as well. However, the Gospels we are familiar with today do not mention his marriage, which leads us to wonder why the authors of these texts chose not to address his personal life, perhaps because they wanted to focus on his spiritual message and teachings. Although these clues are not sufficient to definitively confirm that Jesus was married, they offer valuable insights into the ongoing mysteries surrounding his life. The question of whether Jesus had a wife and children is not only a historical debate, but also opens up fresh discoveries about how we perceive him and the message he left for humanity. Each new piece of evidence, each discovery, compels us to reconsider one of the greatest figures in human history. In the 4th century text Acts of Philip, It is claimed that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married in a ceremony attended by many of his disciples. This text provides a detailed description of their wedding, including the presence of guests, the exchange of vows, and a subsequent celebration. However, the unusual details in this wedding description have caused many to reflect. One peculiar detail is that the text describes Jesus and Mary entering the bridal chamber naked, with light radiating from their bodies. This not only makes their wedding distinct from typical ones, but also implies that it was more than a physical union. It was a spiritual and sacred bond. Some scholars argue that the description in Acts of Philip should not be taken literally but symbolically, representing the soul connection between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, rather than a physical one. They suggest that this is a symbolic expression of the deep spiritual unity between the two, reflecting the noble and pure nature of their relationship. However, other scholars believe that this description refers to an actual wedding that took place in the earthly realm, with Jesus and Mary Magdalene as the central figures in a completely real marriage ceremony. This expands the debate over the authenticity of the text. Like many other ancient texts, the true meaning of Acts of Philip remains an unresolved question. The details might not be an accurate historical record, but a symbolic interpretation meant to highlight the divine and special relationship between Jesus and Mary. Nevertheless, the evidence from Acts of Philip continues to offer a fresh perspective on the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, implying that they may have shared a much closer bond than what is presented in the traditional Gospels, particularly within the context of ancient Jewish culture, where rabbis were required to marry. It would not be surprising if Jesus followed this tradition. In fact, throughout history, religious leaders like rabbis were expected to marry to preserve family values and respect religious ceremonies. Therefore, the possibility that Jesus married a significant woman like Mary Magdalene is not beyond expectation. It may be part of a larger message he wished to deliver. Additionally, the relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene is referenced in other texts, such as the Gospel of Mary, a work discovered in the late 19th century. This text provides an alternative view of their relationship, where Mary reveals that she and Jesus shared a profound, equal spiritual connection. These accounts show their special closeness, making the question of whether they were truly married increasingly complex. All this evidence opens up an untold story about the lives of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, challenging long-standing assumptions about him and his relationship with the disciples. The question of whether Jesus was married not only alters our perception of him as a human, but it may also clarify aspects of Christian doctrine that remain unknown. While we may never know the definitive answer, these discoveries help expand our understanding of one of the greatest figures in human history. So, what are we to do with all this evidence? Could it be that Jesus truly married, despite what the Bible says about him? This is certainly a controversial question, with strong arguments on both sides. One of the main reasons that opponents of the theory that Jesus married offer is the silence in the Bible regarding his wife and children. If Jesus had married, why is there no mention of his family in the Gospels we possess today? This further strengthens the argument from skeptics who claim that this hypothesis is merely a modern invention, inspired by contemporary cultural works like Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, and has yet to be proven by reliable historical evidence. However, there are counter-arguments to these points. Some scholars propose that the Bible may have intentionally omitted or excluded any reference to Jesus' wife and children, because it did not align with the spiritual objectives of the Gospels. The focus on Jesus' religious life may have led the Gospel writers to choose not to mention personal details about his family. Additionally, some scholars believe the Gospel authors may have considered emphasizing Jesus' family life unnecessary, as they aim to focus on his mission of salvation and his teachings. However, we cannot easily disregard the fact that some lesser-known ancient texts, though disputed for authenticity, strongly hint at the possibility of a marriage relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. For instance, the Gospel of Philip, an ancient Gnostic text, portrays Mary Magdalene as Jesus' companion, the one he loved more than all the other disciples. In this text, Mary is not just seen as an important disciple, but as someone who holds a central role in Jesus' life. This description has raised suspicions that Mary and Jesus may have had a relationship that went beyond mere friendship. Referring to Mary as the companion could be interpreted as a subtle allusion to a close and intimate relationship, possibly even a marital one, something never mentioned in the canonical Gospels. Although some ancient texts like the Gospel of Philip may provoke controversy over their authenticity, they open the possibility that Jesus may have had a family life that remains unknown to us. This challenges the traditional assumption of him as a figure entirely detached from personal affairs, and raises the question of whether these details might have been omitted or excluded during the process of compiling the Gospels we have today. However, we must also acknowledge that there is no direct evidence confirming Jesus' marriage in the canonical Gospels. The appearance of texts like the Gospel of Philip and the Coptic papyrus fragments only provides hints, not indisputable evidence. Thus, while we may accept that these hypotheses merit further investigation, drawing a definitive conclusion about Jesus' personal life remains something that cannot be asserted with certainty. What is important is to continue research, broaden our understanding, and remain open-minded to new discoveries, whether or not these revelations change the traditional portrayal of Jesus. While we may never know the truth about whether Jesus was married, one thing is certain. The Church firmly maintains its view that Jesus was celibate and never married. This perspective has become a fiercely debated topic and an inseparable part of the history of Christian doctrine. While many modern believers consider Jesus' celibacy a core principle of Christian faith, the historical reality is much more complicated. It is broadly acknowledged that the notion of Jesus' celibacy was firmly established in the 4th century, as the Church worked to create a distinct identity for its faith and separate itself from pagan religions. At this time, as Christianity grew stronger and gained greater influence in society, Church leaders realized that one way to differentiate themselves from pagan religions was to emphasize Jesus' purity and superior morality. Aside from the theological aspect, promoting Jesus' celibacy had practical implications within the Church itself. By this time, the Church was becoming more institutionalized and hierarchical, with an increasing number of priests and bishops. A significant concern at the time was that if priests and bishops married and had children, they might pass on wealth and power to their families. By encouraging celibacy, the Church could prevent clergy from becoming heirs to property, thus preserving the concentration of power within the Church, without being fragmented by generational inheritance. However, not all Christian communities embraced this view from the beginning. Some early Christian groups, particularly the Gnostics, believed that Jesus had been married. These communities held differing views, reflected in texts like the Gospel of Philip and the Coptic papyrus fragments, which depict the intimate relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. The diversity of these viewpoints reflects the historical fact that, in the early periods of Christianity, there was no unified consensus regarding Jesus' personal life. It is also worth noting that the Church's promotion of Jesus' celibacy was not just a matter of historical interpretation, but also had practical implications for the structure and operation of the Church. Imposing celibacy on clergy led to serious issues, including sexual misconduct, abuse, and a shortage of priests. The strictness and prohibition of sexual purity created a culture of shame and oppression in Christian societies. This is evident in the Church's prohibition of premarital sex, as well as its restrictions on sexuality within Christian teachings. The stigma against non-heterosexual orientations and non-reproductive sexual acts also reflects a society where the control of sexuality and family relationships became an inseparable part of religious norms. All these elements suggest that the idea of Jesus' celibacy was not only a theological concept, but also an institutional strategy to preserve power and define Christianity's identity in the complex social and religious context of that era. When we reflect on all these elements, it is clear that promoting Jesus' celibacy played a significant role in shaping Christian history and culture. But we also cannot ignore the large questions surrounding the true reasons behind the shift in how his personal life was perceived. In recent years, a growing movement within the Church has begun to question the role of celibacy in the Christian faith. Some within the Church argue that emphasizing celibacy has contributed to a culture of secrecy, lack of transparency, and even dishonesty. They contend that a more open and honest approach to sexuality, one that aligns better with the teachings and messages of Jesus, might be the key to fostering a healthier and more transparent Christian community. These individuals believe that embracing emotional relationships, including marriage, would make Jesus' teachings more accessible and relatable, rather than creating unattainable ideals. So, what do you think? Could Jesus have been married to Mary Magdalene? Or is this just an intriguing theory that will forever remain an unresolved mystery? While we may never have a conclusive answer, questioning and exploring different possibilities is undoubtedly an essential part of the journey to understand Jesus and his teachings. The decision of whether Jesus was married, and whether it changes the way we understand him, is ultimately yours to make. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel to keep exploring fascinating questions and unresolved mysteries in future videos. Lord, grant us wisdom and peace as we search for truth. Help us better understand your teachings and live according to the love you have taught. Guide us in all our thoughts and actions so we may always live in a way that is worthy of your love and grace. Amen.